It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, The Digital Customer Experience of Tomorrow, brought to you by FICO and AWS. All around the globe, FICO is seeing traditional banks, fintechs, new challenger banks, and even telcos and utility providers move to increasingly digital business channels, while focusing on enhancing the end customer experience. This transformation is underpinned by the creation of an open standards-based platform to enable third-party integrations while reducing costs and driving efficiency throughout the business value chain. To operationalize this shift, FICO saw the enormous value in working with Amazon Web Services as the most comprehensive platform, both in terms of offering and reach around the world. To help institutions achieve their potential on the cloud that is both trusted and considered best in class. Today, we have two presentations for you, as well as a panel discussion. Let me introduce the speakers for today. We have Bala Singhania. Bala Singhania is the EVP and Chief Digital Officer of HDFC Life Insurance based out of Mumbai and has 20 years of experience in consulting and banking industry. He leads all the digital and analytic initiatives at HDFC Life, and his team is responsible for harnessing the power of traditional and non-traditional data sources to improve the customer experience and digitalize the customer journey. Jason Humphrey is currently the acting CRO for ANZ and joined the bank in 2010, having spent 10 years with GE, holding a variety of senior risk roles, including as CRO for GE New Zealand and head of risk for GE Automotive. Over the last 20 years, he's been involved in a large number of commercial and retail acquisitions, various integrations of acquired businesses, and delivered a successful business strategy during the GFC. Bill Wade is our General Manager for FICO's Decision Management line of business, which builds and delivers analytics, decisioning, and optimization solutions that help enterprises identify and take action on unique predictive insights in real time. Bill joined us in 2002 and has a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Lehigh University. And while he was there, he started his interest in AI with research completed with the National Sciences Foundation, placing him at the coalface of the industry back in the late 80s and early 90s. David Fodor is the Business Development Manager of Financial Services at AWS. For the past 25 years, David has worked within the financial services industry in Australia and in the UK, accumulating a diverse skill set transcending the banking value chain. He joined the Amazon Web Services business development team in 2017 as the FSI lead of Australia and New Zealand. Darryl Conop is the Senior Director of Global Credit Lifecycle Practice for FICO Advisors. He's a 20-year veteran of banking and consulting, specializing in enterprise risk management. He's lived and worked in Canada, United States, Japan, and Vietnam, and consulted in numerous other countries. He started as a teller during university in a bank and became a CRO and CCO titled at various financial institutions. Nilanshuk Haldar is the head of partnerships at APAC Financial Services. Nilanshuk is responsible for financial services partnership across APAC for AWS. In this role, he helps ISVs, fintechs, and technology consulting firms grow and scale their business with banks, insurers, asset managers, and other financial institutions. And Dan McConaughey joined FICO in April 2010 as head of the Asia Pacific region. He is responsible for leading the company's growth in Asia Pacific, overseeing the region's clients and employees in over 14 offices. Dan helped lead the way, taking our customers on a journey to the cloud and helping them to reap the benefits from software as a service offerings that are powerful, scalable, bespoke, and cost-effective. Now, let me pass you over to Dan to kick off today's session.
Thank you, Sex, and thank you for everyone joining. I usually kick these sessions off in the past by saying we're in exciting times, but under COVID-19, we are truly under exciting times. I'm not sure if you're all aware, but the company has been in this journey, this digital journey, probably for the last 6 or 7 years, when we've been preparing ourselves to be able to help you all make this transition. I will say that this is an exciting time. I think that the strategies that we've laid out are going to be hopefully very helpful for you. Our overall objective is become your trusted advisor, and that's why we have sessions such as today. As a trusted advisor, we want to make sure that we give you the best practices. We've learned a lot in this journey, and we've learned a lot from our customers and their successes, and we want to make sure that you hear that so that you can apply that in your own organization. I'm also excited to be here with our partner AWS. Early on, we made a decision that we would standardize on AWS and have been working very closely with them. And they've also been partnering with us to make sure that you're fully supported in whatever needs as part of this digital transformation that you're all probably underway with. So with that, I'd like to thank you again and hand it over to Longchuck from AWS.
Thank you, Dan, and thanks, Saxon, and welcome everybody to this webinar. As people mentioned, we are indeed living in interesting times, and it's in these times that we are hearing a lot of questions and demands from our customers across Asia Pacific on how we can help them better deal with what we are going through today, and also to prepare for what's probably going to be a very, very different world over the next 20 to 36 months perspective. I just want to say that from a partnership perspective, we are working very closely with FICO. And the reason we are doing this webinar supporting FICO is to take the partnership story to all of you who are listening in, and also talk a little bit about several customers across the region who are adopting FICO solutions running on AWS. And we have those customers all the way from Australia or New Zealand to India, so far as Asia Pacific is concerned, and also in between at places like Hong Kong or Thailand. So once again, welcome to the webinar. And if you have any questions after the webinar, FICO and AWS would be happy to help you with your specific problem statement or problem that you are trying to solve with our help. So with that, I'd like to hand it over back to Saxon.
Thank you, Nilanshak, and thank you, Dan. Thank you for those opening remarks. Let me now pass you over to our first presenter for the day, Bill Wade.
Thank you, Saxon. Let's switch our presentation here real quick. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. Saxon introduced me in a little bit of a blast from the past. We've come a long way with technology since the 80s and 90s when I started my research work in AI and advanced decisioning technologies. Today, I just wanted to share a little bit with you about some of the customer experiences we have in and around the use of transactional alternative data in a digital world, and sort of open up today's session with some background on FICO. To begin with, I just want to start with the validation in the marketplace and where everyone is heading. Very clearly, everyone understands that we're at a spot where, in order to get to genuine customer centricity, we have to move beyond just a product level approach. And the world of digital is sort of opening up that interaction to the degree where it's not just to the consumer, but also to the partners and other constituents that are actually driving our business today. And it's becoming more and more clear that there's a requirement to overhaul our core platforms in order to achieve this objective. In concert with that is, if you have or are in the process of transforming your business and moving to digital platforms, you're ahead of the curve with regard to the disruption, and you become the disruptor instead of the disruptee. It's very clear that this is evident today in many of the client engagements that we have. And all of us are on that journey. It's a question of where we are on the maturity of that journey. Some of us are further along than others, but from a digital world, digital decisioning is a key part of bringing together the full value of digital transformation. Most everyone has accomplished the core basics of business intelligence, predictive analytics, and even decision support capabilities. But when we get into the digital world and we start driving to digital decisioning in a digital transformation world, we have to move beyond that into prescriptive analytics, beyond prescriptive analytics, even into connected decisions across the enterprise. But ultimately, what we're seeing is this concept of centralized decisioning where all data is actually flowing about the consumer and about the businesses flowing in a real-time environment where decisions are made across the customer lifecycle and brought to bear to the business to drive faster, better, smarter, more profitable decisions. In this context, we often use the term decision assets, and it's a term that is actually gaining popularity in the analyst coverage world as well as we talk about digital decisioning. Well, so what do we actually mean by decision assets? Let's actually get a grounding definition of it. Decision assets are all of those attributes, characteristics, strategies, analytics, decision models, processes, objectives, and constraints that are embodied within your unique intellectual property around how you operate your business to drive competitive advantage. And as we move to the digital world, this actually becomes the brain of the digital engagement that you have with your consumers. So with that backdrop, what we're seeing is that the world and the days of actually using your decision assets in a siloed form are of the past, where they're actually beginning to start connecting them and ultimately centralizing them, not from the perspective of centralizing them and putting them in one place, centralizing them around the consumer and focusing on the consumer itself while you're driving those business decisions. FICO has a platform, and that platform we define as the ability to empower business users for agile, transparent characteristic strategy and analytics to automate and optimize in real time for improved business results. There's many elements, but there's three main elements that we see comes out of this. First and foremost is the customer characteristics that from an increasing amount of alternative and digital data sources. And it's tapping into that data source that actually is empowering our customer decisions and optimizing those interactions. It's radically enhancing the way that we form our strategies and apply our analytics, and it's leading to business transparency of these connected outcomes that's making us business agile so that we can respond very quickly to the needs of the digital world. It also provides the tools that are necessary to simulate business outcomes and generate an advanced feature generation off of the data itself so you can get more insight out of that data to drive your business. From an architectural perspective, our platform is actually based on and delivery on a cloud architecture based on AWS. It's centered around a series of microservices that are foundational on a core set of common infrastructure capabilities. And on top of that are components or capabilities around things like analytics, simulation and optimization, decision modeling, management and governance of those, the modeling of decisions, the case management, the business process management. And as input is all of the data and the systems, not just the data, but all the systems of our clients to enrich them and make them smarter, and wrapped with applications that are specific to your life cycle needs. From a business perspective, these core capabilities that actually enable digital transformation are end-to-end, starting with the data ingestion and the management of that data, and augmenting that with business capabilities to calculate new business characteristics and attributes, profiles or time series information, automatic feature generation using machine learning technology, streaming analytics, and real-time statistics. This allows us to tap into that data, create stronger characteristic libraries that can be used by the business across a series of microservices, including a whole series of analytics, scorecards, your Python or R SAS models, link analysis, IML or FIT capability, identity management, and also microservices that you will use across your enterprise, like ability to pay, pricing, workout, eligibility. All of this is actually captured in what we call the Analytic Data Mart. The Analytic Data Mart provides transparency to the business in the form of reporting, explainability, audit, and governance that actually comes automatic from all of the data flowing through, the characteristics that are generated, and the microservices that are executed. Orchestrating those microservices can bring together your lifecycle applications and needs to fit your specific priorities. And underneath that is the visualization and validation, as well as statistics and simulation that your business can use to drive enhancements of the way that they engage digitally with your consumers. An example of this, just to bring this home, a 100-year-old bank wanted to get into the world of digital. They were traditionally brick and mortar, and what they were looking to do was a fully digital customer experience on a new line of business. Opening that up required them to actually move very quickly across the life cycle, inclusive of originations, active portfolio management, and debt collection, all in a digital world, and move at a digital pace. MVP was actually, for this particular customer, was actually brought up in a couple of weeks of signing, and very quickly be able to start stepping consumers through a walkthrough program to get them onboarded. But also it included the ability to ingest alternative data where the underbanked or even unbanked situation or where they were looking to provide loans, the risk assessment could not actually be done without this alternative data. Being fully operational within 6 months, they actually had a brand new digital bank, 100%. It's my pleasure to be with you today. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Saxon.
Great, thanks, Bill.
All right, thanks, Saxon. Saxon's going to kindly drive my slides for me today. So just while Saxon's bringing that up, just an introduction to myself. For a long time, I had the pleasure of working in the banking industry, buying technology from FICO. So I spent 20 years as a technology buyer. So now in my new format with AWS, it's a real pleasure to be able to partner with FICO, who we have a global partnership with, to bring the new age of consumption and cloud-based microservices-based consumption to the market. My role today is in two parts. One, I'm just going to give you a very quick fly-through of the AWS platform, what it is and what it does, very 101 of cloud, just on the assumption that a lot of our audience is fairly new to cloud. And then we'll move into the panel discussion, and it's a great pleasure that we've got four great speakers to join me, and we'll have a conversation around what we're seeing in terms of digital trends, underpinned by cloud platforms or not, and we'll get to the heart of what we're seeing in the market. So Saxon, I might get you to move to the first slide on my deck, thanks. And this is really about what is the AWS platform. So at the bottom line, AWS is a platform of around about 180 services delivered on demand through the internet with a very simple pay-as-you-go pricing model. So it flips the paradigm of the license-based model. It optimizes a customer's needs in terms of how much they need to consume and in what format over time. Interestingly, when I joined AWS back in 2017, we had around about 90 services on our platform. Today, we have around about 180. So you can see just how significant the growth of public cloud platforms has been, even over the course of just over 3 years' time. Next slide, thanks, Saxon. The next slide I've got is, and I apologize in advance, it's what we call our eye chart, and it's our best representation of what AWS is on one page. From the bare bones essentials of compute, storage, database, and networking, through the security and compliance services that are so vitally important to regulated institutions throughout the financial services industry globally, to the fast-growing selection of data analytics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning services that we provide to our customers who are mature cloud users, all around supported by the technology and business services to ensure that our customers are operating efficiently and in a cost-optimized consumption pattern on our platform. And finally, we have a very broad and deep marketplace of AWS partners that provide easy and price-optimized consumption of their third-party applications on our platform. FICO obviously being one of those key partners on our platform. So that's as good as we can do to represent the 180 odd services that we provide to our market globally. Next slide. Thanks, Saxon. Because the tools and techniques of public cloud are still relatively new, although they've been around for some 14, 15 years now globally, we invest heavily to build a very comprehensive suite of training and certification programs that helps support our customers as they grow through their stages of adoption for cloud. We want to make sure, firstly and foremostly, that they're optimizing the investments that they make to develop an AWS footprint. We want to maximize the productivity of their developer communities so that they're getting the maximum value from what they build and how they build it on our platform. We want to maximize the security and the control frameworks that our customers put around their AWS footprint. And finally, we also want to maximize the availability of their applications. Ultimately, platform's no good if it doesn't provide resilience of the applications that it supports. So we at AWS bias towards what we call high availability architectures so that we can absolutely maximize the uptime of our customers' applications, thus providing customer experience unbroken 24/7, 365. Thanks, Saxon. We'll go to the next slide. At the bottom line, cloud is a tool, and it's all about what you can do with that tool to achieve your business outcomes. So organizations move to cloud not because it's cool, not because it's the thing that everyone is doing, not because they feel the need to stay in line with their peers. They do it ultimately to keep the needs of their key stakeholders met and exceeded. So when you're talking about customers, our AWS customers move to cloud to ensure a excellent customer experience through the applications that they provide. From a shareholder perspective, AWS provides the maximum return on investment and ultimately the return on equity that our customers invest in their platforms. And ultimately, from an employee perspective, we want to make sure that we provide both maximum productivity for those that develop and build on our platform, but also in the new age of working, we provide a good pathway of professional development for those in the technology community who are looking for a new way forward, a new way of working, and a new platform upon which to develop and grow professionally. Next slide. Thanks, Saxon. So when I look at financial services and why financial services organizations have turned to the cloud, and in my direct experience over the last 3.5 years, there are 4 key areas that I look for to prove the value of our platform. Security being one of them. Interestingly, our customers who have been on our platform for some time will say now that with experience and with maturity of their cloud footprint, they feel exceedingly more secure today working in cloud than they did in their previous on-premise paradigm. Resilience, the benefits, as I mentioned before, of our high availability architecture are shown in the uptime of the applications that our customers run on our platform. From a platform agility perspective, mature customers who have reached what we call infrastructure immutability stage, where they can, with one touch, infrastructure as code capability, both build and tear down their infrastructure almost instantaneously. We find that as being a real key to acceleration of their development cycles so they can get through from code development commits to production in as fast a manner as possible. And then finally, from a cost perspective, optimized infrastructure that matches consumption patterns by far beats massive upfront capital expenditure with guesstimates of how much capacity you might need in 3, 4, 5 years' time. Saxon, next slide. And you'll hear today from Bala, who will speak shortly with me on the panel. We've had some fantastic customers, and HDFC Life is a really great example of an organisation that's adopted cloud and is really using the power of cloud to help enable the development of a recommendation engine that they are using to provide very personalised experiences for their customers via multiple channels of engagement. I'll let Bala talk a little bit about the ways and means that they're using the platform and our services to enable the recommendation engine. HDFC Life is a fantastic example from the Indian market of a progressive, early adopting customer who's got great value out of their platform over the last couple of years. Next one, Saxon. Another organisation time in the Australian market who's been on a clouded journey for some time. They're a really early adopter of the platform way back in 2012 when we first had an infrastructure footprint here in the Australian region is NAB. NAB started their journey and have been progressively working their way through quite a large-scale application migration agenda with some 2,000 applications in scope to migrate to public cloud platforms over time. They reached a massive milestone last weekend when they moved one of their most key mission-critical applications that supports their business bank to AWS. About 2 years in the making, an amazing feat, and you'll see some more news on the way that NAB has used cloud to provide much more platform resilience and a better customer experience to their banking customers as a result. Behind the scenes, as it describes on the slide, NAB have been working with us over the last couple of years to develop 2 broad assets. One, their Discovery Cloud, backed by what they call their National Data Hub, as their new modern data architecture that will eventually, at maturity, power their data science practice and help bring new products and services to market. Also, what's not described on the screen, NAB have been working closely with FICO through the use of the CCS platform on AWS to provide delinquency management practice and techniques for their collections and recoveries business for the last few years as well. Next slide, thanks, Saxon. And you can skip to the next one. So I just wanted to touch on, and as my T-shirt says, today's reality for the financial services and other industry verticals is a broad shift to software as a service. Cloud has been a natural enabler of a rapid shift from traditional on-premise license-based models to a very consumption-based model for software consumption. There are 3 core objectives that organizations have that power their journey to SaaS. Speed, so the ability to get through a procurement and installation phase more quickly than a traditional license model has been one of the key benefits. The currency of their software, so not falling behind on upgrade pathways, and again, the cost efficiency that comes with maximizing the benefits of the pay-as-you-go consumption model through a SaaS consumption is undoubted. Ultimately, what that does is it enables that organization to displace the costs of just keeping the lights on and running infrastructure and running data centers, and move that cost and investment of the organization's time and effort back to their core business. Ultimately, financial services organizations are in the business of developing products and managing risks and maximizing the customer experience. They're not generally in the business of running technology and data centers and all of the stuff that goes behind that. So movement to SaaS over time has seen a very broad shift to organizations being to focus back on what they're good at. So sticking to your knitting and providing the best customer experience you possibly can. We're seeing a lot of that now in the Australian market through the onset and the growth of the neobanks over the last couple of years. And finally, to finish off my 101 of cloud, it'd be negligent not to mention, Saxon, on the next slide, our partnership with FICO. FICO are one of our global lighthouse partners across the financial services industry. They have been very visionary in their adoption of the platform. They have proven the value of moving to serverless development to remove any unnecessary infrastructure requirements and ultimately speed up and improve their developer productivity through that. The re-architecture that Bill mentioned before of the decision management platform is a really good example of where FICO has really pushed the boundary on how far you can drive a SaaS model across a very comprehensive and well architected platform, and the delivery of those subcomponents of DMP as microservices now has set FICO up really well for the new world of customers wanting to seek SaaS consumption through cloud platforms. So it's really great to work with FICO. We've been working hand in hand across the Australian and New Zealand market with some great success, and we welcome all opportunities that you have to discuss your requirements going forward. I'm going to finish my 101 there, and I'm now going to flip the context of the discussion over to my panel. So I'm going to welcome back the panel participants at this time. We're going to spend the next 45 minutes or so talking about their experiences in the world of digitization, as I just pull up my other screen so I can get my questions. So we titled the topic of the discussion today, Cracking the Code to Digital Customer Experience Success. And we're really talking about some key themes around how to accelerate digital transformation, how importantly to make it successful, and how to provide your customers ultimately with better customer experiences through that move to digitized processes, platforms, and ways and means of talking to your customers. So I want to bring in Bill firstly as the first cab off the rank, because there's been some interesting stats, Bill, that were published recently, which indicate that as few as 30% of all digital transformation programs actually succeed. 30%, it's as low as that. In your experience working with your clients at FICO, what are some of the contributors that you've seen that that contribute to such a high failure rate? And then on the flip side to that, what measures have you seen those organizations who do succeed take to execute successfully? I'm really interested to get your thoughts on that.
Thank you, David. Yeah, it's actually an alarming statistic, particularly if it's bundled with the fact that well over $1 trillion has been spent with a 30% success rate. That's a massive amount of investment with very little return on the aggregate. I think in the words of one of our customers, one of the biggest reasons for the failure is that it sort of requires a foundational, a complete change within our banking and other organizations that we do business with about how they look at the consumer. It's not just about providing a digital interface or a digital way of communicating. It actually starts with sort of turning the business on ear and looking at it from the consumer perspective. A great comment from one of our customers in Brazil came back with the observation that it requires mind share and stakeholder ownership across the organization. It starts with the C-level suite and works its way down across the organization. Couple that fact with some studies that were done, independent studies that were done by analyst firms on this topic, since it's such a significant amount of investment that's failed. That firm sort of describes digital transformations as the coming together of three main pillars, which is people, process, and technology. And it's a great article because they talk about what happens if you have one or two of them, but not all three of them. And it lays out the scenarios. You can well imagine that. You might have the people working on a process, but without the technology, you can't respond quickly. You might have a process with technology, but if the people aren't injected in that, the people that actually run the business aren't part of that, you end up falling short yet again. And so bringing all three of them together is sort of foundational to the achievement. I think from those that have been successful, I'd say there's a couple of characteristics that we see. One, it's not a big bang. It's actually just starting with where the heavy lifting is required for the immediate business return. And sometimes it's just a simple thing. It might just simply be the process of capturing better customer characteristics to inform the business and then growing from there. But it definitely starts with a mindset about a vision and objective of transforming the way that the consumer is viewed and treated. And if you don't start with that premise, if you keep the silo-based approach of interacting with them, you're just automating your current business practices. You're not transforming them into a digital world.
And Bill, do you think that, what you just mentioned there, it sounds as like, some organizations may make the mistake of thinking it's merely a lift and shift rather than a transformation and a re-engineering of the process or the service that sits behind it. Do you think there's given the high rates of failure, do you think that there is a more measured approach that reduces the risk of failure that organizations can take?
From what I've seen from the customers that we've worked with that are successful, they do take a more measured approach. And the anchor point is different in each case. In some cases, they simply have automation problems around how they assess risk, how they can ingest alternative data to provide a better product fit or better product alignment, or it might be the new product introduction process and streamlining that and making sure that they're leveraging the analytic capabilities that they're developing off of this data. It could be something as simple as that, or it could be even as simple as, I just don't know enough about my consumer to actually engage with them digitally. So I've got this available information. I've got this compute power now. I can get access to massive amounts of data in real time. How do I actually tap into that to inform and insight the business and the business stakeholders to leverage that? And they just start with those simple, basic building blocks, and it cascades from there. An interesting point that sort of validates that is what I have seen is customers or clients that actually start with some basic things like just providing deeper consumer insight within, say, just a particular line of business like auto. What happens is the other businesses start looking at that insight and that information that's now available for that auto customer, and they're like, hey, I wish I had access to that. Well, they can. They can, and particularly in a cloud world, that's immediately available to them and shareable. And so and then they start aggregating, right? When the card group starts adding their view, or a HELOC or home equity line starts adding their view, all of a sudden you start enriching this view of the consumer. And it happens from a contributory model, not I'm going to do it this way or I'm going to do it that way in different lines of business. And so this incremental approach sort of feeds back to the consumer. And the consumer says, wow, you actually understand me, and you actually understand more about me. And you're aligning and timing your interactions with me when I need it at the time to event horizon, not just because you want to sell me something.
Yeah, really good point. And Bala, I might bring you in now because I think HDFC has been a really good example of an organisation that's demonstrated to its customers the show me you know me technique. So, Bala, we've seen an acceleration of the shift to digital customer engagements, and it really heightens the importance of having both a high quality data set and a very comprehensive and broad data set to work with as well. Can you tell us a little bit about HDFC and how you've used data to support the recommendation engine that ensures that you're making appropriate product recommendations to your customers? Be fascinated to learn a bit of insight on that.
Sure. I presume I'm audible. So
Yes.
Thanks, David. Basically, I think as an organization, HDFC Life started to basically do a significant investment in digitalization as well as collecting and meaningfully storage of the data. And while a certain percentage of our customers come directly to us, a huge percentage comes through our partners, which means if you are, let's say, a customer of a bank and come to us, digitization means you do not have to say you are David and you are a male and this age and this is your customer IDs and so on. So creating a meaningful data pipeline so that the customer feels it's all a seamless journey from a perspective of whether it is buying or whether it is customer service or something else. That's a huge thing. And using this information, for example, we have to do underwriting, which is either a financial underwriting or a medical underwriting for customers' life. Now, all of this obviously requires information. Some of it are internal generated, some of it are external generated. So, for example, a FICO score is an external variable that we use for financial underwriting. We are now getting more and more bullish on the medical data. And while we may not know exactly who you are and what your medical conditions are, but knowing that you stay in this area, you have this kind of a lifestyle, if I use that along with certain amount of customer declaration that customer does at the time of buying an insurance, and how I marry those two information to make a proper medical underwriting at the same time. So some of these are helping us to keep ourselves ahead of the market. So the key thing here is use both internal and external data. Now there is a increased focus on structured data. So for example, there are algorithms which are not yet perfected, but somebody can look at your face, estimate a BMI. Someone can look at your face and estimate what is the likelihood of you being a smoker. If you just look at our declaration, only 10% of our customers declared that they are smokers. And from a market, know that 10% is not correct. But I don't know who smokes. But when I now start to look at certain facial technologies, I can estimate what likelihood it is for you to be a smoker and so on. So the point here is many of these unstructured data were either not available or the underlying AI ML technologies were not available. And AWS kind of infrastructure allows me to sort of quickly process this data. The underlying computation is not easy in terms of time. If you're looking at thousands of applications going through the same engine, doing academic project for 5 is a very different story altogether. So bottom line, the face of the data, the core data is probably still the same, but the face of the data has changed significantly in last couple of years.
And Jason, I might bring it back to the Australian market as a, you're a risk professional that's been in the Australian business for quite some time, a fantastic FICO customer in this local market. What are you seeing as some of the local trends around digital channels, different types of processes and use cases that are being reinvented through digitized customer experience?
Yeah, that's a good one, David. I think I've seen, to be honest, and I've come to the conclusion that pandemics are like wars. The only good thing to come out of either is the speed of innovation, because I think we've seen more digital innovation in the last probably 2 months in Australia than probably over the last 2 years, outside of the challenger banks, of course, coming to the Australian market. And to answer the question, one of the more ingenious ones that sort of popped up as a problem around pandemics, which will be sustainable. And I think that's the other great thing we're seeing is the speed of innovation at the moment that's really solving for a pandemic problem they're all sustainable. There's no reason why any of these solutions shouldn't have existed before COVID. One was around valuations. So the simple problem that if we had to do a full valuation on a property, it becomes very difficult to get access. Well, one, a valuer may not want to actually go to the property and connect or be in a house where they don't know if somebody has been impacted or infected by COVID. Likewise, somebody that's in the house doesn't want a stranger walking through the house. So that became a bit of a problem. And very quickly, the industry came to a conclusion. When I say quickly, it was a matter of weeks that effectively a digital inspection was spun up in Australia, where you could have an on-site inspection of a house using Skype and recording basically movements within the house to generate what would normally be done by a manual inspection. Now, why that didn't exist, sort of 2 months ago, sort of 3 months ago, rather than 2 months ago, you sort of scratch your head. Yeah, that's just one example. EKYC is another, I think, great example of everybody was doing it, but doing it at different forms and different speed, and that's now sped up quite a bit. The handling of documents, we've seen the states, so the way Australia is created, we have territories and states with its own effective governments within each, and they run their own, for example, titles office to record mortgage documents. And we actually saw at the start of COVID, the states promoting the digital conveyancing capabilities that, again, different states are at different levels of adoption around a national ability to process a mortgage digitally from a conveyancing perspective. And we've seen the state governments want to hurry that along because they don't want people sitting across tables, shaking hands, exchanging pens. So it's amazing the amount of innovation that, to be honest, I think existed, but was really never a necessity until now. So EKYC, valuations, the processing of other forms of documentation, so the ability to ingest transactional data, either in the form, because we aren't open banked fully in Australia, use of OCR technology to convert effectively facts and figures off paper into normalized data for digital decisioning or transmission. But again, across the sort of three principles, if I think from a credit perspective, around origination, transacting, and collecting, all three have been impacted more so, I think, in the last 2 months in the context of digital innovation and uptake than we've seen in the last 2 years. And I think where you go, Dave.
Do you think, given the rapid evolution of some of these new experiences, do you think that this is the new normal, or do you think there's a risk that when the time comes that we go back to a post-COVID world, there may be just this, natural human tendency to snap back and go back to the way we were doing things in the past?
Yeah, so I don't think, I know what we're doing, and I'd argue, if we're doing it, everybody else is doing it too, because it's not unique to a bank. What we're doing is changing our process to be sustainable. So these are sustainable changes. Further question I've got on the back of that, David, would the momentum of change continue post-COVID? And that would be something I would like to say yes to. And if the answer was yes, it actually challenges perhaps some of the disruption that may be happening in the Australian market, both in terms of banks building their own digital banks, because that's built on a business case that the core bank, the bricks and mortar, is never going to become digital. So that if that becomes more and more digital, the business case for transition to something else gets eaten away slightly. And secondly, I think for those challenger banks, it becomes a wee bit harder, because the advantage that they've got about going in, not having the legacy of non-change and non-digitization, all of a sudden is closing quite quickly.
Yeah, it's a really good point. We have a saying, never waste a crisis, and we're hoping that, some of the things that we're doing differently right now will become normal, will become a normal way of working. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Absolutely.
Well, I might bring you in now. I'm really interested in the way that you work with your clients. You work predominantly on the business side of your client group. So what are the things that you talk to and ask of your customers when you're talking about you know what they want to do and their problems when you engage? How do you approach that?
Sure. Thanks for that, David. And just some great stuff there by Jason, by the way. And I could spend the next 2 hours just having the conversation around some of the things that he said there. There's just an absolute plethora of things that are kind of certainly pre-COVID have come up, and then COVID have been really enhanced. And really, when I think about kind of the top 3 or 4, you know, these, for the most part, when I'm engaging with a client, we'll kind of get these out of the way in the initial part of the discussion. And these really start to drive capabilities that are required from a digital platform perspective, right? And Bill mentioned, you know, kind of the capabilities and decision assets that we kind of look at, you know, from a FICO perspective, AWS perspective. And the first thing for me is and it's kind of a critical one because it often talks about where they are in their digital maturity is, are you looking at existing customers only when you're starting to talk about onboarding for new products, or you're looking at new to bank? And so, you know, if you're a digital only bank, that question gets answered very easily because everybody is going to be onboarded from a digital context. But existing bricks and mortar bank, of course, have different capabilities, and you're really often talking about a digital channel. And the challenge is there specifically really in that authentication space. And the way you authenticate, or your opportunities and challenges for authenticating from a existing customer standpoint, are significantly different from new to bank. The types of fraud are different. And authentication is a great example that benefits from the use of external, internal, biometric, real-time data. And so it really starts to kind of nail down some of the capabilities. And the second thing that I really start to engage with clients around is they say, well, we want to be 100% automated. And the first question I ask is, what do you mean by automation? Because there's a big difference between kind of automation from the bank perspective and then self-service from a customer perspective. If I reach a point in an authentication process where I now need to do physical ID, I've got a heightened sensitivity towards fraud, I've got some characteristics that might lead me toward it. So now I'm going to do a physical ID verification, maybe some facial recognition. Well, that's an example of self-service, but the financial institution's not doing extra manual labor. Their systems are chugging away, asking for something because there's a heightened degree of risk, but the customer now can experience that process. You know, and then of course it opens up that whole conversation around frictionless. And I never say frictionless, you'll never hear me say it. I say the right amount of friction based upon the process you've got at hand and the risks that you see. Sometimes it's extremely small, and other times it's necessarily large. And then, you know, that kind of leads me into the kind of the third thing are you considering supporting or moving clients to other channels? And so in the case of a digital channel, if you're a large bricks and mortar bank, you have an opportunity to leverage some of these other channels for specific products or processes. And it's not necessarily that you want to become omni-channel for all of your product offerings, or that you want to drive people coming into your digital channel into your branch or telecommunication channels. But there may be reasons that you want to do that. And yeah, it's going to be friction. And yes, the customer's telling you something by coming into the digital channel, and moving them out is often the wrong thing to do. But it starts to get into this idea of, in the case of a digital bank, are you going to really focus in on your target, which is digital savvy and digital only customers? What do you do with the rest of those customers? In many cases, we're having intelligent discussions around, that's not my target, I'll leave that for someone else. And that's a big deal. And that's often very difficult for the traditional banker who's come from, I've got all my channels, I can be all things for all people, where a lot of the savvy digital banks are going, you know what, this is my box, this is where I can play. If I work with them, fantastic. But if they cannot, then this isn't for them. And I think that the size of that box, you know, to bring this back to COVID, the size of the box now has grown, right? My parents are 75 years old, and they have never paid their bills digitally. Well, guess what they did during COVID, right? And that's one tiny little example. Now, yeah, they had some challenges in authenticating because they had never done that before. But I think, you know, the new normal is in fact that the audience of people from a digital banking perspective has grown significantly. And, you know, the products and services that have been challenged, I think mortgage is an example that was used previously. Mortgage is a great example of a product that we've had to do some things that we had on the shelf that we were thinking about, but all of a sudden during the crisis, those things started to make a lot more sense. And now we're testing, now we're controlling, now we're going to understand the value that those products and services bring. Why would we go back, right?
Yeah, it sounds to me like, Darryl, the risk in a post-COVID world of leaving the customer segments that are not tech savvy and less likely to engage digitally is looking lower than it was before. It's looking like there's been a shift, a definite behavioural shift.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I might just pause and just remind the listening audience, we're really looking for some Q&A, so please jump on the Q&A chat box and send me some questions. I'd love to be able to pose some questions to the panel that are not just mine. So please, when you do get a chance, jump in there and I'll do my best to facilitate them to the panel speakers. I'll jump back to Bill. Bill, digital transformation agendas often seek to capitalise investments that are made to an organisation's data assets, such as data lakes, data warehouses, etc., with expanded sources, revitalised data science practices, and ultimately more modern analytic techniques. Many of the investments have not yet been monetised to drive, you know, whether it's business growth or efficiency or whatever the agenda is. From your experience, working with your customers, your clients, what can be done to help drive the business transformation and growth out of those, you know, those big investments made?
It's a great question, David, because there's a fair bit of investment that's been made around collecting this data. And then soon after that, there was a huge investment made in the data scientist world to extract value out of that data. So we now have these very powerful machine learning models that can process massive amounts of data. They can find patterns or features, as they're called in the AI world, that are predictive and potentially useful. Because we have all of this compute power, we have the ability to get access to this data. So why is the transition that occurred to leverage these capabilities to drive the business outcomes? I think most of it stems from the fact that these are just tools. Ultimately, machine learning models, they do what they're told. They do it faster than a human. They can process more data than we can possibly consume ourselves. But ultimately, in order for them to be useful, they have to have some business outcome that they drive. They need to be applied. And I think one of the biggest challenges in this world is transparency and understandability, not only of what the model's doing, but how to use it. And so another set of statistics, but it's amazing. Different firms have different numbers. Some of them say it's 92%, some of them say it's 85%, some say 72%, but they all agree that a large number of these analytics that get built never get used. And one of the things that's common is that they get created by data scientists because they're interesting projects, they're experiments. But what they need to be is actually applied to the problem to drive an outcome, and that's not going to happen unless the business is actually engaged to use the tools. And so bridging that world between the data scientist and the business stakeholder, the user, is sort of the paramount issue with regard to getting that monetization. But when they are applied, they provide great value in the context of a very specific business problem.
Yeah, fantastic. Bala, I might swing back to you if that's okay. And I mentioned it during my presentation, I referenced HDFC Life and its use of AWS to build a recommendation engine. The engine, as I understand, is supported by an AWS data lake. And I'd love to understand, because data lakes, you know, are very now, they've very much been the thing to do. I'd very much like to understand a little bit of your perspective on how a cloud-based data lake has helped to underpin your digital strategy. we talk about monetization of assets that have been developed. I think HDFC's done a really good job of that. There's obviously some secret sauce in there. How have you gone about, capitalizing on the investments you've made in a data lake?
So basically, I think one of the things we started to do was, after a point in time, which was maybe about 3 years back, we said everything that we do new has to be on the cloud, both from a processing perspective as well as on the storage perspective. What it meant was, we do not, some of these are textbook answers around the advantage of cloud, is we do not have to necessarily guess the size of the box in terms of how much storage or how much compute we will need, and we are able to scale as the data get bigger and bigger. So basically it means that if we are testing 5 different new applications, I do not have to get 5 boxes. On the cloud, I can decide what I want, and depending on which are the say models and which are the applications that a customer is using, I can scale that while either killing or reducing the size of other boxes. So scalability is one big thing, but also what it means is, because I have the same system, while I can do it with the traditional data sets as well, but because more and more of my application, which are customer facing or partner facing, are web enabled, and because my infrastructure on the website is also through AWS, what it means is the way these APIs touch these data is consistent, which means one, I do not have to develop the APIs for different applications separately. And second is that from a customer perspective, you are getting the similar experience no matter how you are coming. Other piece which is more recent is, now that we, and I talked about it earlier, about unstructured data. So be it voice samples, audio, your facial recognition and related technology and all of that. The traditional data storages do not necessarily do a great job of storing that and getting meaningful features or meaningful insights out of that. So AWS definitely helps us do that, but also in terms of applications that sits on top of that. And other thing that generally it means is you have lower failure point in terms of the percentage of time these applications are up. Often it is like 99.5% or more. So that is great. And the thing is, I do not even have to work hard to get that kind of a reliability in terms of percentage downtime being low. Some of it is basically inbuilt, and as an organization, these are the things that I don't necessarily have to care about. Same thing from a security perspective. I can define my security protocols around what application can use what and for what purposes. So for example, if I do not want someone to use my customer image, but can still run a customer recognition algorithm and give an output saying 0 to 1, what is the percentage match rate and so on, I can define those kinds of protocols on the systems, which means customer's image is still private and you are still able to say whether this image looks like Bala. And you get yes or no, or maybe kind of the answer. You don't get to see the picture that is stored here. So those are very simple examples, but the point here is many of these kind of applications did not come in the mainstream or even in the thought process, say a couple of years back, but these are becoming more and more important. And obviously, COVID era meant in-person authentication, etc., which were popular in India, definitely outside tier 1 cities. These become more difficult, which means we were already on the path of digitization of some of these, and these become very, very handy tools because traditional techniques such as in-person authentication and so on were not available anymore. So I'm repeating that point, but that has been very, very helpful to us.
Yep, fantastic. Fantastic insights, Bart. It sounds like you're on a really good road there. Jason, I might just swing back to you, mate. I'm really interested in your role as CRO at ANZ. I'm fascinated as we move closer to open banking in the Australian market, the intersection between, you know, more data, more third-party data, the big data concept with a continuing journey of organizations to move to digital channels, so that less, you know, face-to-face interactions. Can you share some insights in how you think about that as a risk professional? You know, what practices you look to put into place into that paradigm, and how you effectively mitigate any risk that might present?
Yeah, look, I think from a data perspective, you know, David, there's a new dimension, or a series of new dimensions that we start to unlock. So I pick on the probably most insightful piece of information we've had recently being the last sort of 2 to 5 years that's been enabled, and that being transactional data. And transactional data in its use, if you think about the processes you have in a bank that you can use transactional data for, currently have it as part of, the savings you can create are quite immense, but it creates a new problem. So how do you know when the information you have on a customer is complete? So we've had to create completeness flags. So when you use or ingest transactional data, and this applies for open banking in the future, how do I know when I've got the complete view of the customer? So when can I start using that information to know that I've got all their income, all their expenses? You end up with the other complexity of, is that data shared by anybody? Because the account that I have is a joint account versus a singular account. You have categorization problems, you have calculation problems, and as I said, you've got that consolidation problem. Do I roll it up under an individual, under a household, under a series of customers? And that all impacts and informs how you can actually use the information. So to me, that's a new problem that we solve for, and we get around, and we put assumptions around. When you talk about how that data is used and the practices put in place, I can tell you how it solves problems, because I can tell you what bad looks like versus what good looks like. How many times do we hear customers applying for a mortgage but being rejected for a credit card on the same day? So I can apply for a $350,000 mortgage, but I can't get a $5,000 credit card from the same bank. How does that work? So, same for transactions. So I have an informal limit on an overdraft account, but I don't have one, or I can't go a limit on a credit card for the same customer for the same bank. And I get a phone call from the bank for one product from a collections perspective, and then the same day I get another phone call from the same bank on another product. Why didn't you ring me once, or why are you ringing me? So all that starts to become a catalyst, and I would define it as a catalyst in terms of open banking to me. And we don't even need open banking. Open banking is just another mechanism, another channel to ingest either transactional data we already have, transactional data we can get today through other forms, be it screen scraping or OCRing. This is just another nice way to get that information. It doesn't solve any problems, though. It creates these new problems that we've got to deliver into. So that, to me, that's the key to open banking, is being future ready or transformational ready, to be able to use it in the context, but understanding the limitations that you need to cater for before you have that goodness of fit for information use.
Yeah. And while I've got you, we touched a little bit on this before, but do you think the experiences that banking and broader financial services customers have had over the last 3 months in the way that they engage with their financial institution has changed their expectations going forward? And if so, do you think, or are you planning to holistically change the ways and means that you engage and provide experience?
Oh yeah, it goes back to the other question. I think about how sustainable are the things we're doing, and having eKYC, and so a good question would be, if I went to the branch, we were like the previous example, the 75-year-old parents that never paid bills before. I mean, I'm pretty sure they'll be continuing to pay bills going forward. So these are some of the things I think we need to we need to think about. But eKYC originations has changed, collections have become more self-serve, and the insight. I can tell you as a bank, we're using transactional data more in the last 3 weeks to create insight around early indicators than probably what we've done in the last 3 years. So we've had really good operational use, and to me the secret sauce of open banking, or actually digital banking, really falls down to three key areas. One, building an operational data store, and this is not about this is not about a database. This is about an operational data store that has cadence around latency has been effectively removed from your core or your source information, so it's as streamed as possible, and accuracy, probably because of that, is also of a high dimension with good metadata and data quality hubs supporting that data. If that operational data is available, then creating analytical capability, and again, I think a great example is work, or actually is the FICO platform. I can tell you, and anybody on this call that's been dealing with transactional data will probably attest that the insight that you can garner and create is far greater than the number of resources available. So how do you unlock that data quicker? Well, in a digital world, one great way of doing it is having a partnership. And if you've got partnerships like we have with FICO, how do you get the data that you need to FICO? And having AWS and the platform available not only creates the ability to get the data over, but FICO can run analytics as a service, software as a service for us to create value we can just ingest back into our process. So that's number 2 around analytics. And number 3, to the point raised earlier, so many great processes stop and fail because analytics and insight is only great if you operationalize it. Turning the data into dollars is the key, and having your digital systems either at a platform level or within your own capability to actually use that insight to turn it into meaningful decisions is critical as a third point.
Yeah, treatment strategy. It's what it's all about. Treatment strategy. Guys, we had a question come in on the Q&A from Maddie Kutzner, who I think had to drop off, unfortunately, but I might throw it to either Bill or Darryl to see if they got any thoughts. Is there a technical way to deal with the challenge of explainability? I presume explainability of your models, e.g. visualization. Anyone got any thoughts they want to share on that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Darryl might want to add, but I mean, visualization is a key aspect for business adoption. It's actually one of the core tenets of what we put in our platform, from explainability of a black box machine learning model and being able to have visualization of what it's doing so you understand it, but also for the connected decision. Like if you're using a score, if you're using data, you need to understand where that data is being used and how to visualize that.
Right. I'll add a little to that, and I'll add it on the coattails of Scott Zoldi, our Chief Analytics Officer. The nature of a lot of AI is that it lacks kind of traditional ease of kind of reasons for credit decline, which is probably the easiest example to think about. Many regulators require very specific reasons back to the customer around why they didn't pass a certain metric. Through the use of visualization and techniques, you're actually able to determine what the primary causers of the decline or the approval, in fact, within these AI models. And I'm going to kind of stop there before I get beyond my depth. Although as an actuary, I could dig in there, but it wouldn't be fair, and it probably wouldn't be as accurate as kind of reaching out to us separately. And we can certainly provide you with a great deal of information on explainable AI and ethical AI as well.
Awesome, thank you. Hey, we've run out of time. We've gone just over time just recently, so I'm going to wrap it up and hand back to Saxon. But before I do hand back to you, Saxon, I just want to thank each of the panelists for sharing their time today, and their candid responses to the questions, to share experiences and how they're thinking about digitization of their businesses. So thank you very much. Obviously, if there are any questions or if we can help you at all, You can find me on LinkedIn. Really keen to work with customers who are looking to move to cloud and on that journey, work with fantastic partners like FICO along the way. So Saxon, I'll hand back to you.
Great, thank you. Let me echo a big thank you to all of our panelists, and that brings our discussion and webinar to a close. So look, if any of today's content has piqued your interest and you'd like to have a complimentary consult with any of our speakers, you can let us know in the feedback or polling box that will appear at the end of this session. So after you close out, there will be a box that will appear and you can let us know in that box. Also, feel free to send us any questions you may have and we'll get those answered for you. So with that said, I'd like to thank you all again for your time and attention. Thanks so much for joining us and have a great day.